Let's go live now to the Nationals leader, Michael McCormack. He joins us live from Canberra. Thank you for your time. What are you delivering for farmers today?
Well, there's a range of measures, Laura. There's, as you've said in the intro, there's $200 million more for the Building Better Regions Fund, so a dedicated round for those drought-stricken communities. So the councils within those communities will be able to apply for that funding. It will be dedicated to those areas stricken by the drought. Of course, there's around $140 million for Roads to Recovery funding, additional to what those councils would have already been receiving. Of course, there are 537 councils throughout Australia, but 128 of them, 6 up on previously, have received $1 million. So 128 councils will be receiving an additional $1 million plus additional Roads to Recovery funding. And that's to keep those road gangs council-related in the communities. Many of them, of course, have taken on farmhands to help with the additional maintenance works. But also when road gangs come into drought-stricken communities, they, of course, need to be accommodated. They, of course, need to be fed. So it's a stimulus all round. So, look, it's a good package of measures. Of course, the concessional loans through the Regional Investment Corporation, should those ag-related businesses, should farmers wish to avail themselves of those loans, interest-free for 2 years, well, that option is there too, and we encourage, of course, farmers not to self-assess, to look at what range of options are available, to look at what assistance is available, and then to make sure that they discuss it with their family, with their bank, with their accountant, with their financial counsellor.
OK, let's go through some of the detail. We'll start with the concessional loans. What makes you think that these farmers, who are already mortgaged to the hilt in many cases, will be able to pay back these loans after 2 years?
Well, we're hoping it's going to rain. We're hoping that it's going to, of course, the good times will eventually come. We all know that Australia has rains followed by droughts, followed by rains. That's the cycle of Australia. That's the cycle of agriculture. Agriculture has a very, very promising story to tell. We've got, of course, the world's best food and fibre. The good times will eventually return, and when they do, the farmers will be able to, of course, should they avail themselves of these loans, and should agribusinesses, ag-related small businesses, should they feel the need to take out a loan, of course, they will recover too. We know that our farmers are a resilient bunch. We know that those ag-related businesses are also very, very resilient. So we're offering it to them. They, of course, don't have to make that available to themselves, but should they, having had the proper discussion with their financial experts, with their counsellors, with their banks and accountants, should they see the need that they can think that they can then, of course, pay it back, then that option is there for them.
Well, what's the bond rate? What's this really costing the government? The headline's $1 billion today.
Well, the interest rate will be 3.11% after the tax-free, after the interest-free 2 years. But the fact is, that's what farmers have asked us to provide. That's what, when we've gone out to these drought-stricken communities and talked to ag-related, talked to seed merchants, talked to those sorts of small businesses, fertilisers, spray businesses, agronomists. That's what they've told us that they want. A fellow went on one of the talkback shows and said, if only we could get some concessional loans for 12 months. Well, you know what? We're doing it interest-free for 2 years. So we're doing it for that 2 year period. Hopefully, in that 2 years, the rains will come, the fodder will return, the crops will be able to be grown. We'll be able to, of course, over a period of time, restock much of the breeding cattle and sheep, etc., that we've had to send off to processing. That's also going to, of course, be an issue. At the moment, the tipping rate is now about 55% heifers and cows taking cattle, of course, to the processing. Normally, it's about 40 to 45%. So that's a concern. And, of course, we know that it takes years to recover breeding stock.
So what's the real cost to the government then?
Well, the cost is immaterial. We need to do this.
Not
Scott
really.
Morrison
not when
knows
you're
that we need to
pursuing
do
a
this.
surplus like you are.
Well, we're going to produce a surplus, the first surplus for 12 years. But this is a necessary cost of doing government. This is a necessary cost of being a right and responsible government that is actually reaching out to our drought-stricken communities, not just our farmers.
Loans, then?
Well, that depends on how many, of course, concessional loans are taken,
and have
Laura.
you done modelling on how many farmers might take this up?
Of course, Of course we have, but that modelling, of course, is based on making sure that those loans are available. And as a responsible government which knows how to manage the books, we're in a position where we're able to provide these incentives, whether it's roads funding, whether it's maintenance funding for much-needed roads, councils, the concessional loans. We're able to do that because we've got a budget which is in a good position, far better position than what we were left. Imagine this drought if Labor were in government.
Okay.
I mean, they didn't want to support the Future Drought Fund at any rate.
Let's look at the other parts of this package. The Nationals just 2 weeks ago wanted $10 million to be given to each shire affected by the drought. What you've got today is $1 million for an extra 6 shires.
Well, the drought package that was put up by a member of the National Party was around $650 million, but contingent on the states kicking the till. This package that we're announcing today is not contingent on the states stumping up money. This is real money, real cash for our farming communities, for our rural and regional communities hardest hit by the drought.
Out of some of your own funds, a Building Better Regions fund, to pay for it?
Well, that's just part of the package. It's been redirected, and it's a drought fund. It's a drought round, a dedicated drought round. You might recall that the last Building Better Regions round had a dedicated tourism component, which worked very, very well. And I know that given the fact that as the 128 councils announced today, each and every state and the Northern Territory have councils in drought areas which can then apply for that funding.
But Michael
and
McCormack,
so that,
just 2 weeks ago you wanted an extra $1.3 billion in funding for these regions and for these council areas that are affected by the drought. What happened?
That was one measure put forward by one member of the National Party. Yes, he took it to the National Party room, but it wasn't a full National Party room. You might recall, Laura, that the senators were not in our National Party room and there was one member away for personal reasons. And so it wasn't endorsed by the National Party as such. It was a member's proposal. And look, I always welcome any National Party member bringing forward these proposals, bringing forward suggestions that are going to help our drought-stricken communities. That was one policy position that particular member thought might help the situation. And indeed, of course, we know that councils need help. We know that agribusinesses need help and farmers need additional help, and that's what we're providing today.
In the end, are you satisfied, or did you get rolled in cabinet?
No, I didn't get rolled in cabinet at all. In fact, the package of measures very much had a very much a National Party decision making on this. Scott Morrison and I work very, very well. I'm not going to go on what happens in cabinet. That happens in cabinet. The fact is, Scott Morrison understands, as all the Liberals do, how important the drought is and the fact that we address it. Of course, many regional Liberals are feeling this just as much as National Party.
So
they live it every day.
Are you restoring the funding, restoring that money to the farm household allowance component and the people that have already been kicked off that this year?
Well, as I've said to you previously, we've got legislation to ensure that when passed, that we will make sure that there are additional top-up payments for those farmers. And that's very, very important to know that our farmers won't be left behind by this government. We are very much, as Liberals and Nationals, dedicated to making sure that we address the drought, that we continue to monitor the situation and address it as it's needed. Of course, we've had patchy rain over the weekend. Some areas got very good rain, but much more is required. Much more rain is required. This is going to take many more months, indeed years, for these drought-stricken communities to recover. But recover they will. And when they do, agriculture is going to be booming again, as it's not broken at the moment, but it certainly needs help. We're providing that today, Laura.
And did you try to bury that Auditor General's report on Tuesday?
I don't try and no. That wasn't a decision of government when it came out. That was not a decision by government at all. That was made by others. The fact is, I'm very proud of what we've done in the regional space, and the fact is, when it's funding for regional communities under a regional package that is provided by the Liberals and Nationals, it actually goes to the regions. Unlike Labor, who provide that sort of funding for metropolitan seats, we provide it for the regions. That's the difference. It's good funding. It's going to create jobs. It's going to create a lot more opportunities in those regional areas where it's most needed.